Hi, I'm Parneet Jaggi, and this is going to be a discussion on the poem Telephone Conversation written by Wole Soyinka. As we talked in the earlier lecture, this poem, Telephone Conversation, is a commentary on racism and it points towards the conflict within the protagonist himself, who's the narrator or the writer. Now, let me just introduce you to the brief idea of the poem, what it is all about. Now, here in this poem, Telephone Conversation, the speaker is looking for a rental apartment or a house in London, and the whole struggle begins with his confession on the telephone that he's an African, he's a black man, which actually sparks up a notion of racism in the landlady who is on the other side of the phone, who silently, ironically, sarcastically denies renting him the house because he is a black man. Now, the fact that a man is judged on the basis of his color, skin color, even in this time, 20th and 21st century, is rather alarming. And it clearly projects a society where individuality is at stake. So we see that in this poem, it strikes a positive note as the man gets to know that his privacy won't be hampered as the landlady doesn't stay even on the premises, and so he finds it very interesting that he could get that portion of the house. But the moment he mentions that he's a black man, there is a sudden change in attitude and a sudden silence, a very dangerous kind of a silence which he cannot actually digest. So let's look into the thematic analysis of the poem as to why and how Wole Soyinka has dealt with the theme of racism in the poem. Now, here we see Soyinka is trying to highlight the impact of racial discrimination in the microstructure of society. Now, this microstructure is the ground level which he's facing. He's having it face to face. And it is his personal, subjective experience that he's sharing with us readers. Now, the title clearly reveals that two people are talking on the phone. And the theme is carried out through this dialogue form that we have already read in the first lecture. Now, when the poem begins, let's have a brief look. It is informed that one speaker is looking for the flat and the price is reasonable, location is good, it's indifferent to the race and color. So the African American seeker, this man, he has a positive attitude and he makes a telephone call to a white landlady asking for a room for rent. Now, quite opposed to his expectation, this landlady remains silent as soon as she is told about his identity as an African, when he says, I am an African. Now, this silence is very meaningful in this poem because it reflects her attitude of indifference and also her reservation towards the blacks. Then we see that she further inquires about his colors as she confirms him as the black, and then she hangs up the phone. And she's trying to convince herself about the shades of black that he might look like. So this incident, ironically, reflects the discrimination being suffered by the blacks for a long time. So in words, the landlady, although has not said anything, she has not denied his request, but she just hangs up the phone, and it's very humorous as well as ironical, but it is also pathetic and tragic in the other sense. Now, this poem, as we come to know of the background, was written at the moment when blacks were given the equal rights and responsibilities, constitutionally and politically, famously known as the apartheid. Now, despite these rights at the macro level of society, micro changes are hard to achieve. And we see here that racial discrimination does not end until the landlady is changed personally. So, if we say political changes have brought a lot of change, no, perhaps they have not brought the changes on the micro level. So, for example, in this poem, the discrimination looks very serious when the speaker says, Madam, wouldn't you rather see for yourself that my bottom is raven black? So he is kind of requesting her to meet him in person, but she hangs up the phone. Now, it is like indicated here. It is not a very direct message, but it is implied that change is possible only through a mutual dialogue on the of the blacks and whites. And also, this poem does not hint towards the possibility of such dialogue because we still see the stubborn kind of attitude in society. Now, the open ended structure of the poem represents the uncertain future of the blacks. It is certain how long they have to plead like that. Now, they've seen this tragic history also, in which this discrimination was very varied and very broad. Now, since we talk of political reforms and social reforms, the writer Soyinka still does not see that bright spot in the form of a big social change. Looking at the style of the poem, we have lots of images. Now, this time, these images are not those golden, flowery garden images as we have in poetry, but imagery is important and different. And this device of imagery has been used to deliver the message of anger and frustration rather than what we have traditionally in poetry. Images used for beauty, for nature, for peace, for calm, for serenity. No. Here they deliver the message of frustration, anger towards racial discrimination, prevalent at the very micro level of our society. Now, one imagery is like lipstick coated, gold rolled, cigarette holder piped, is the mental image of the lady, made by the African speaker by just listening to her voice on the phone. Now, his attitude towards her is that she is socially superior than him and from a higher strata of society. Then we have the image of huge bus crushing the black tar. Now, this is highly symbolic of how the major white community dominates and insults the minor African community. Now, here he becomes so angry when she further asks about the darkness of his color to confirm his identity, that he sees red everywhere. So here we have the lines where he is kind of, he brings in a variety of colors and he says, facially I'm brunette, but madam, you should see the rest of me. Palm of my hand, my sole of my feet are peroxide bland friction. Now here he is kind of getting in these shades of reds and browns just to make fun of her attitude as to how she is discriminating him on the basis of this one particular feature, and that is color. Now, the next important poetic device used is irony. Now, irony lies in the fact that the lady has given an ad about the flat stating that the price is reasonable and indifferent. Now, indifferent in the case of color of the skin of any people, but when the African room seeker, the narrator, confesses about his true identity, she holds a silence and she does not respond to him. And her words and action do not match because he can judge very well what she is thinking and what she is reflecting through her silence. Now, this vehement irony is meant to attack the so-called social equality created by the whites, which is actually fake in his perspective. The next irony that is presented is that the African speaker self-confesses about his identity to the white lady, which vividly shows his loser mentality and lack of confidence in his own color of skin, upon which he does not have any control. So he has to be so meek and feel lower as if he has committed a crime. Now here there are both sides. He lacks the confidence and courage to just go on with the deal without concealing his identity as based on color. And on the other side, the white lady is also adamant that okay, when she knows that he is a black, belongs to the African community, her expressions, her even non-verbal expressions change altogether. So this was how very beautifully, very practically, very ironically, the poem is presented as a commentary on this serious problem of racism, and we see how the speaker uses his sharp wit and humor to make the readers understand the absurdity of racism that he has gone through personally. So, this was my interpretation of the poem Telephone Conversation by Wole Soyinka. Thank you for now.